morning to all participants on virtually in Kenya and outside Kenya. And let me start off with what the problem is. A lot of studies have shown that access to finance is the #1 obstacle for businesses. I mean, The Economist came out with a report last year in 2020, 1 in 4 in sub-Saharan Africa face that problem. That's the #1 challenge. And historically, digitization in the financial space has mainly been focused in payments, and that has happened a lot more quicker. When you look at the trade side, it's lagging behind. And post-COVID, it has shown that digitization needs to happen across the board. Friction slows down supply chains. And this impacts goods and services. Not being digital itself is a disruption in the value and supply chain. So our aim is to make trade frictionless. I mean, we are powering financiers to take financing to the tail end of the value chain. I mean, you've heard panelists talk about banks and large corporates. What about the SMEs? Those are the engines of the economy, especially in developing countries like on our continent, right? Mm-hmm. And we take it from end to end, from digital onboarding to local trade and cross-border trade. What do I mean by that? I mean, for large corporates, a lot of it has been digitized because they have the capital to do it. They have the relationships with the banks, be it local or international. And when we try to say, what about SMEs within the value chain of the corporate or outside the value chain of the corporate? How do they access financing? So what we have done is we have enabled financiers to deploy capital efficiently and businesses to access financing where they want it, when they want it. And like a social network, a business can then invite their suppliers, their buyers into the ecosystem. And they may not necessarily bank with that particular bank, but they can then open up to, for financiers, be it a bank or a fund, to step in and finance that particular transaction. And even more so, local supply chain can be digitized to a certain extent. Cross-border trade becomes even more complicated because trust is at the heart of it. As we saw in the previous panel, there's a lot of parts which is still paper-based. And the beauty of our platform is still we're able to ingest that information, even though it's paper-based, to really using power of AI to help digitize those value chains. At the end, for the SME, whether they're part of a value chain or not, with our platform, they can access financing, all kinds of financing, the financial products that a bank can provide or a fund can provide, such as purchase order financing, invoice discounting, bonds and guarantees. If they want to apply for tenders, bid bonds, we have digitized that entire process, even cross-border. So even applying for a letter of credit can be done via our platform. And at the comfort of their own home, via self-service, via an app, via the browser. So we want to make it as easy as possible and remove friction from the supply chains and the trade finance, access to financing for businesses. Regulation is always going to be there, and no matter how fast or how far technology goes, it will always be ahead of regulation. But it's very important that we have that engagement with all stakeholders, including the regulators, and even more so the regulators. So see how we can collaborate. The buzzword or the keyword has to be collaboration in this ever-changing space. When new models come up, new technology comes up, we cannot do it in isolation. We have to sit together at the table and say, how can we help the desired individuals or businesses to receive that, in this case, access to funding or financing in a reasonable manner, in an affordable manner, right? There's a lot of predatory lending out there. Of course, then there's pushback from society, etc. But by looking at how we can work together to, 1, make the journey smoother, 2, make it frictionless, and 3, make it affordable to all, so that whoever comes into the space knows, or this playground knows, these are the rules you have to play by, and everyone knows that these are the rules, so that we all have that predictability in that aspect, right? But by talking to various stakeholders, we have to be able to also facilitate trade, for example, right? We need access to data. I mean, in Kenya, we have gone far by digitizing and giving access to data. So you can access the BRS, which is the business registration services. You can access the tax compliance, etc. Those are being digitized. Now imagine those is being digitized and opened up across the continent, even more so with African Free Trade Area. KYC would become a breeze. I know who I'm dealing with. I know the credit score. And we can help monetize that as Gapstack, right? For the governments are struggling to find, how do I monetize that data? And Kenya has done very well. And by adopting these things, we then make facilitation of trade faster. Look at what was discussed in the previous panel with M-letter, e-bill of lading. Which African country has adopted it? Not a single one. But we should be in the frontier space. We have an opportunity to leapfrog and say, how can we adopt this new technology that has been done in Asia, been done in Europe? But trade is huge in Africa, be it cross-border or inter-Africa trade, or out of Africa trade, or into Africa trade, export, imports into Africa. So it is very, very important. For us, as Gapstack, we operate within different jurisdictions by providing the rails for digitized trade. What do I mean by that? We enable the financiers to then percolate it down the value chain. So if a bank wants to deploy capital, like they will deploy capital to large corporates, they will deploy capital to maybe medium or well-established businesses, but lower down the value chain, the tail end of the value chain, it is still manual. If a bar owner, if a small business in Kibera wants to access financing today, he has to go via predatory lending. Why can't he access affordable financing via institutions like the financiers, the banks, who can then provide much cheaper? But by getting that data, they can then enable a risk profile that makes it easy for them to provide financing. Because they don't have that KYC data, they sort of struggle and hence perceived high risk. Now imagine you have transactional data. How often does that SME in Kibera transact with their supplier? Via our platform, you can do that. How often is he or she buying goods from a value chain? How often is he or she making payments? Those data points then enrich the credit score for that particular business, even though they're in Kibera, but every business is aspirational. I want to grow. I want to go from one business to a chain of businesses, even if it's within Kibera, right? Or even if I'm an established business in this central business district of Nairobi, I have an ambition to grow. But if I share my data points, which on the platform you can see by raising purchase orders, invoices, when you see those data points, you see the transactions, you have the historical data of those transactions, you can then start providing tailor-made financing solutions from the financier towards the business. You know exactly what that business is doing, how often is it doing, and where is it doing, who are the suppliers, who are the buyers. And so for us, I mean, in not so many words, Gapstack is built for multi-jurisdiction, be it from a regional bank perspective or an individual bank perspective. We can deploy across countries. We are a cloud-based platform. So connecting via APIs makes it very simple. We have soft touch integrations. So to move into a new country takes hours for us, not weeks or years. Yeah, thank you. And I want to leave with a few words, which is collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. With the power of technology, if we all collaborate, be it government agencies, logistics providers, financiers, business, come onto one. Even if we have digital islands, we can open it up to collaborate and share data so that we can make trade much faster and facilitate both cross-border and local trade. I'll leave you with the final African probe, although with a slight tweak. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, in brackets with Gapstack. Thank you very much.